So in this video I'm going to be explaining in depth what I would do if I was Manchester United manager, looking at the systems I would use, how I would solve certain issues that United currently have. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, but let's get straight into it now by looking at the position system I would use. So on paper, I guess you could say that my system would be a 4-2-3-1, but in possession it'll be radically different to how Solskjaer deploys his. Solskjaer's side in possession move into a 2-4-3-1 kind of shape. However, in the build-up phase, I would be looking to use either a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-4-1-2, depending on how the opposition's set up, which I will explain in just a minute. I would have Wan-Bissaka sitting a lot deeper than Shaw. Shaw would push up the field, playing more like a wing-back than a full-back, and this is why. In the build-up phase, it's critical to have width in your system. This is why I favour a back three, certainly in the build-up phase, so I'd have Wan-Bissaka tucking in, playing almost as a right-sided centre-back, with the left-sided centre-back pushing out a bit wider, and the right-sided centre-back becoming a central centre-back in a back three. This means that if our opponents press us in a front two, we've got the extra man and we have the width, so we can circulate the ball around that front two. If they look to press us in a front three, this is where the midfield line come into play. If the opposition's front three push high up the pitch, this is going to leave space on the flank, so I would have Shaw and Sancho dropping slightly deeper to open up the passing lanes, and this means that either the fullbacks are going to go with them and open up space in the channels wide of their centre-backs, or they're going to hold their position and we'll have the wide players free as an outlet. The midfield double pivot are also very important to the build-up phase as well. But before I carry on, let me tell you about today's sponsor, which is Top 11, which is a free-to-play football management game available on iOS, Android and web browser. So if you want to support the channel, make sure you click the link in the description, because as a manager, you'll be in charge of every aspect of your football club, signing players, running training, setting up systems, and many more in order to ultimately lead your squad to winning trophies. There are many ways to play with your friends. You can set up a team, form an association, and play against other groups of managers around the world. You can set up a friendly championship and invite your friends, colleagues, housemates, whoever, to compete for the title of bragging rights to see who's the best manager amongst you. They do have a new feature called Playstyles, which will bring a more tactical, in-depth layer to individual player skills and makes the game a lot more correlated to real-life management. With this new Playstyles feature, you can develop a poacher to get those quick finishes to win you games, or a regista who's going to sit deep and dictate the play. So if you fancy yourself as Manchester United manager as much as I do, click the link at the top of the description, as it will help this channel, and also send me some DMs on Instagram of you playing the game, and I may repost them on my Instagram as well. So the fundamental role of the two central midfielders in the build-up phase is going to be to open up passing lanes to allow us to bypass the opposition's frontline press. Now if the opposition are looking to press us aggressively, what they will probably look to do is push their two central midfielders up onto our double pivot, and if this does happen, we need what I like to call facilitating movement to open up space for our midfield line to drop into, receive the ball, and then we can progress the ball forward into the middle third. What we want to avoid in the build-up phase, and certainly in our own box, is circulation of the ball just for the sake of it. What I mean by this is what we saw against Leicester, where United were just continuously shuffling the ball from side to side without getting out of their defensive third. If we're struggling to play out of the opposition's press because it's too organised or it's man-to-man and it's really hard for us to play out of that press, we need to be looking to pull their midfield up the pitch and exploit the space in behind their midfield with players like Fernandes, Greenwood, whoever's playing in that front line, dropping into the space, and that's what we want to do. So we want to pull the opposition higher up the pitch and create further space between the lines. We want the wide base, which the back three provides, and then with the two central midfielders, they need to be alternating their movement. Sometimes we need a deep single pivot to drop in and create a diamond shape, but if the opposition push a player up onto them, we need the other central midfielder to drop in, creating a pentagon shape, and essentially what we are trying to do is just create an overload in the defensive third, and if the opposition match us player for player, this just means there's more space higher up the pitch, and in that situation we can look for a quick vertical pass higher up the pitch and look to exploit the space that the opposition have left by pushing up the pitch, trying to press us aggressively. Now personnel selection at the back is obviously going to make a massive difference in our ability to play out from the back, but I'm not going to go into who I would select and why just now. I'm going to wait till later on in the video. Instead I'm going to be analysing what we then do when we get to the middle third. So like with the possession shape in the build-up phase, when we get to the middle third, our shape is going to depend a lot on how the opposition decide to defend against us. But the key to deciding which possession shape to use against your opposition is to look where your opposition's weaknesses are. If the opponents are defending in a narrow 4-4-2, the aim should be to try and stretch that midfield line, pulling the wide midfielders away from the central midfielders and creating the space in the half space for the likes of Fernandes, Greenwood or Pogba to drop into. And you do this by having two wide players constantly holding their width, and a little trick to actually pull the midfield line apart is to instruct your wide players to maybe sit a little deeper to draw the wide players in, making them think that that's their man, and they'll be more inclined to drift wider to focus on you. Whereas if you sit higher up the pitch as a wide player, the likelihood is that the fullbacks will see that you're their man, and this will then allow the wide players to shift in narrow and create a narrow four for you then to break down. So the key is to try to make sure that the wide midfielders focus on the fullbacks, drift wider, and that is where the space is created. You can see against the 4-4-2 I would use a 3-2-5 shape, and I would use this shape specifically because I think it allows you to create a lot of numerical overloads in certain key areas of the pitch. In the centre of midfield, if you can draw the front two out of their defensive shape, you can create a box-like shape around the two central midfielders with a double pivot in front and the likes of Fernandes and Greenwood dropping into that half space in behind them. So ideally what you want to be doing is getting the ball into Pogba and McTominay, drawing the opposition central midfield higher up the pitch and allowing Fernandes and Greenwood either side of Ronaldo to drop into those spaces, and that's how you feed the ball in between the lines. Against the 4-5-1 in the middle third is a little different because now the opposition side have a wider midfield line. They have 5 players in there instead of 3, so the wide midfielders can afford to sit a bit wider, close off the space for your wide players, but still have 3 players in the centre of the field to cut off the passing lanes in between the lines. So in this type of situation I would then shift from a 3-2-5 to a 2-3-4-1 shape, and this is because now you don't need 3 players in that back line because you're only up against 1 centre forward, so you can afford to have 2 centre backs split and play the ball around that centre forward. So now I can push Wan-Bissaka slightly further up the field, still playing a narrower, deeper position in line with the deepest central midfielder, which in this case is McTominay. Now you could have one of the central midfielders such as Pogba in this instance pulling maybe out to the left side to provide that 2-3 shape, creating essentially another pentagon, but instead what I would do is have Shaw come and play as an inverted fullback, asking one of the front line players, maybe Mason Greenwood in this situation, to drift out to the left side and provide the width on that side, allowing Shaw to retain a narrower, deeper position. And what this will do is it will then allow Pogba to push up between the lines as he's no longer needed in those deeper lying areas. And rather than a box midfield in the centre of the pitch, we've now got a pentagon shape up against the opposition's midfield 3. If the opposition's wide players tuck inside with the fullbacks, you can now have space created on the flanks for one of the wide attackers, either Sancho or Greenwood, whichever side you want, to drop slightly deeper to provide an outlet, as it's unlikely that the opposition's fullbacks are going to follow those players higher up the pitch and risk leaving space in the channels for the likes of Fernandes and Pogba between the lines or Ronaldo to make runs into. So you can see from both of my possession shapes that it's all about creating overloads and creating a way of progressing the ball forward into the final third, with the main goal being to get the ball in between the lines to your best creative players, and you can do this by manoeuvring the opposition's defensive shape rather than solely relying on your possession shape. You've got to focus on what the opposition are going to do and how you can move their players around with certain trigger movements to create the space that you want. Now these are just 2 possession shapes, but obviously in an actual match you do need to make subtle tweaks, which is what the likes of Tuchel, Ancelotti, Zidane, Guardiola do very often. So you've got to be prepared to be very flexible tactically. You can't just go in, which I think Solskjaer does too often, with a set possession shape and just continue to play that and hoping that individual brilliance brings you out of it. So I definitely wouldn't rule out other possession shapes if it was necessary. Final third, whilst you are relying on individual players' abilities, there are a few ways you can maximise the amount of chances you create. The way to do this is to identify what the strengths of your individual attackers are and try to find a way to maximise them. Now one key strength that I do think Solskjaer and United are currently underusing is Ronaldo's aerial ability. Ronaldo is arguably the best in the world at attacking the ball from across and putting the ball into the net with his head. However, United haven't really used this enough. And so what I would do is I would try to get the likes of Pogba and Fernandes, United's 2 best crossers of the ball, in crossing positions as much as possible in the final third. I would have both Pogba and Fernandes drifting into the flanks, Pogba on the right side, maybe Fernandes on the left side, and try to back up the play, offering a passing option backwards from either Sancho or Shaw or even Greenwood, down the flank, offer a passing option backwards, receive the ball, and you can either put the ball in first time, which I think Pogba would be great at doing, or if it went to Fernandes on the left side, he can put the ball in his right foot and put in a curling cross, as he did for Ronaldo's goal against West Ham earlier on this season. United need to be a lot more decisive on the flanks. When the ball comes back to either Fernandes or Pogba, they need to be putting the ball in the box as early as possible, and this will aid Ronaldo in the box as well, as he'll know that the ball's coming in, he can make his movement, which is usually to pull round the back post onto the weakest aerial player, and and win the header if the ball is right. At the moment it seems like all players are on different wavelengths. Ronaldo doesn't know when the ball's coming in, and the players in those wide positions seem to be reluctant to put in an early cross, as though they've been instructed to pass the ball around and look to work a way through the opposition's defensive unit using a couple of clever passes. However, often United aren't able to do this, and this is why we see United passing the ball around a lot in the final third, but unable to make any progression into the box. And I think if we can get Pogba and Fernandes, and even the likes of Luke Shaw, in these crossing positions more often and instruct them to put in early crosses, then Ronaldo will know to pull around the back post as soon as the ball is in this position, and without doubt this would give Ronaldo a lot more aerial goal scoring opportunities. But United also need to be transitioning their attack quicker when they win the ball in their own half, because this is when there's the most space in the centre of the field, and this is when the likes of Pogba, Sancho and Fernandes are going to thrive most. So I would instruct the side to straight away after there's a turnover in our defensive third or even in our own half to be looking for a vertically direct pass into the likes of Sancho, Pogba, or really any of that midfield three in behind Ronaldo. And if we have just been sitting deep in our own defensive third, Ronaldo can even drop off from the forward line, link the attack before spinning and making the run forward. But most of this just comes from giving the players the license to play these direct passes, as we've seen what Pogba can do with Greenwood's goal against Leeds on the opening day of the season, a great example of how quickly United can counter-attack if players are willing and able to play those direct vertical passes. Also, I think Jadon Sancho's ability is currently being stagnated because United aren't playing on the transition. If you look at Sancho at Dortmund, he thrived when there was a quick attack. When Dortmund would win the ball back in their own half, play a quick pass into him, he could dribble forward and he'd have runners in behind the back line with Erling Haaland and Marco Reus making them penetrating runs, and it was from these sorts of positions where he picked up so many assists. And the likes of Greenwood, Rashford and Ronaldo are perfect for this type of player, because not only do they like to make these spinning runs down the channel in behind the back line, which Sancho needs to be able to play those through balls, but they are also excellent finishers from these wide positions. So if United can do this, then this will not only get the best out of Jadon Sancho, but also out of Greenwood, Rashford and Ronaldo as well. So I've pretty much covered how I would set up my United side from an offensive point of view, and in the second part I'll look at how I would set up United from a defensive point of view, as well as the transfers I would make in January and in the summer, and I think a lot of them will surprise you. That video should be linked in the description below, as well as a link to download the top 11 games. So if you fancy yourself as a football manager, click the link in the description, download the game, because this will help support the channel, and send me some DMs of you playing the game on Instagram, and I may repost them on my Instagram story as well.